The docking bay of Vertex Prime Station was massive. Ships from 100 different worlds filled the space, each one gleaming with advanced technology. Some were made of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. Others floated without visible engines, held aloft by forces that bent reality itself. Among them, the human ship looked small and plain. Captain Daewon watched through the viewport as his vessel, the Steadfast, moved slowly toward its assigned dock. The ship was 40 years old, built from steel and titanium, powered by fusion reactors that any engineer could understand. Its hull was marked with scratches and burns from years of service. To Daewon it was beautiful. To the aliens waiting at the dock it was something else entirely. "They're staring again," said Hana from her station. She was the chief engineer, a woman who knew every bolt and wire on the ship. Her hands moved across the control panel with practiced ease. "I can see them through the external cameras." Daewon nodded. He had expected this. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 15 years ago. They were the newest members, the youngest civilization in a community of species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Every time humans arrived somewhere new, the aliens stared. The ship settled into its dock with a heavy clang of metal on metal. Mechanical clamps locked into place and pressure seals hissed as the airlock connected. Through the cameras, Daewon could see the alien dignitaries gathering. Some pointed at the ship. Others seemed to be talking among themselves, their strange bodies moving in ways that suggested amusement. "Let's get this over with," Daewon said. He stood up and straightened his uniform. "Hana, you're with me. We need to present a good face for Earth." They walked through the corridors of their ship toward the airlock. The walls were lined with pipes and cables, all visible and accessible. Human ships were designed to be repaired by human hands. No exotic materials that required special tools. No technology that only 3 people in the galaxy understood. Just solid engineering that worked. The airlock door opened and they stepped onto Vertex Prime Station. The alien delegation waited for them. At the front stood a being that looked like it was made of blue crystal, tall and elegant. This was High Arbiter Velquin of the Luxari Collective. Next to them stood Merchant Lord Threx, a creature with 6 arms and a body covered in smooth green scales. "Welcome, humans," Velquin said. Their voice sounded like wind chimes. "We are pleased you could join us for the summit." Daewon bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "Thank you for having us. Earth is honored to participate." Threx moved closer to the airlock, peering inside at the Steadfast. His multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "Tell me, Captain, does your species still use chemical propulsion? I noticed your ship has traditional thrusters." "We use fusion drives for main propulsion," Daewon explained. "The chemical thrusters are for fine maneuvering and backup systems." "Fascinating," Threx said, but his tone suggested he meant something else. "The Keth Empire stopped using such methods 3,000 years ago. We found them too. Limited." Other aliens had gathered now, drawn by curiosity. They circled the Steadfast like scholars examining an artifact in a museum. One of them, a floating creature that resembled a jellyfish made of light, drifted close to the hull. "Are these manual control interfaces?" it asked in a bubbling voice. "Physical buttons and switches?" Hana stepped forward. "Yes, manual controls provide redundancy. If our computer systems fail, we can still operate the ship by hand." "But why would your computer systems fail?" another alien asked. This one looked like a walking plant with leaves instead of hair. "Our neural networks are self-repairing. They cannot fail." "Everything can fail," Hana said quietly. "We prefer to be prepared." The plant creature made a sound like rustling leaves. It took Daewon a moment to realize it was laughing. Soon other aliens joined in. The sound filled the docking bay, a chorus of strange voices all expressing the same sentiment. Amusement, pity, condescension. Velquin raised one crystalline hand, and the laughter stopped. "Please forgive our colleagues, Captain. We mean no offense. It is simply that your technology is charmingly antiquated. We sometimes forget that your species is still very young." Daewon felt heat rise in his face, but he kept his expression neutral. "We may be young, but we're here." "That's what matters, indeed," Velquin said. "Shall we proceed to the summit hall? Ambassador Jiwoo is already waiting." They left the docking bay, but several aliens remained behind, still examining the Steadfast. Daewon could hear their comments as he walked away. Words like primitive and simple and cute drifted after them. Hana's jaw was tight, her hands clenched at her sides. The summit hall was enormous, designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and body types. Seats ranged from human-sized chairs to massive platforms that could hold creatures the size of whales. At the center sat Ambassador Jiwoo, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. She was a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many of these meetings. "Captain," she greeted Daewon, "I trust your journey was uneventful?" "The journey was fine," he replied. "The welcome was familiar." Jiwoo's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Understanding. Shared frustration. "They mock what they don't understand," she said softly. "Let them laugh. We have nothing to prove." But before Daewon could respond, the hall fell silent. The council session was beginning. Representatives from dozens of species took their places. Velquin stood at the central podium, their crystalline body reflecting the lights of the hall. "We gather today to discuss trade routes and resource allocation," Velquin announced. "But first, we must address the continued membership of humanity in this council. Some have questioned whether a species with such limited technology should have a voice in galactic affairs." Jiwoo stood. "Humanity's technology may seem simple to you, but it serves our needs. We have traveled to your worlds. We have established trade. We have contributed to galactic society. Is that not enough?" "Contributed?" Threx spoke up from his seat. "What have you contributed? Your ships are slow. Your computers are basic. Your material science is centuries behind ours. You are like children playing at being adults." Other aliens murmured in agreement. Daewon felt anger building in his chest, but Jiwoo remained calm. She had faced this before. "Many times, we learn quickly," she said. "Give us time and we will—" An alarm interrupted her. A shrill sound that cut through the hall like a knife. Velquin touched a control panel, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a star map with a blinking red marker. "A distress signal," Velquin said. "From the edge of council space. A scientific expedition has encountered something unusual." The hologram zoomed in, showing more detail. A massive structure floating in space. It was spherical, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change. Even through the hologram, Daewon could tell it was enormous. "The size of a small moon, at least. What is it?" someone asked. "Unknown," Velquin replied. "The structure does not match any known architecture in our databases. The expedition requests immediate assistance." The council chamber erupted in discussion. Species argued over who should lead the investigation, what resources should be committed, what the structure might be. Daewon listened, but his attention was fixed on the hologram. Something about those geometric patterns seemed familiar, though he couldn't say why. "We will send a joint fleet," Velquin announced. "Representatives from multiple species will participate. This is a matter of galactic importance, and what about us?" Jiwoo asked. "Will humanity be included?" Velquin looked at her for a long moment. "I suppose there is no harm in allowing you to observe." "Yes, Ambassador. You may send a ship." "Try to keep up." More laughter echoed through the hall. But this time Daewon barely noticed. He was still staring at the hologram, at those strange patterns on the structure's surface. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that something important was about to happen. He just didn't know how important it would be. The journey to the edge of council space took 3 days. The joint fleet consisted of 12 ships, each representing a different species and their unique approach to space travel. The Luxari vessel moved through space by bending reality around it, traveling faster than light without actually moving. The Skarn warship used quantum tunneling to skip between points in space. Other ships employed methods that human science could barely understand. The Steadfast used its fusion drive and traveled in a straight line. It was the slowest ship in the fleet, but it got there all the same. Captain Daewon stood on the bridge as they approached the coordinates. The structure appeared on their screens long before they arrived, a dark sphere silhouetted against the stars. As they drew closer, the true scale of it became apparent. It wasn't just the size of a small moon. It was bigger than that, bigger than some planets. "Reading its dimensions now," Hannah said from her station. She had insisted on coming along, leaving the rest of the crew back at Vertex Prime. "Diameter is approximately 15,000 kilometers. Mass is, this can't be right." "What is it?" Daewon asked. "The mass doesn't match the size. It's too light. The structure must be hollow or made of materials we don't recognize." Science Officer Bora leaned forward in her seat. She was young for her position, barely 30, But she had degrees in archaeology and xenology. She studied dead civilizations and their artifacts. Now she stared at the structure with wide eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The other ships in the fleet had already begun their scans. Energy beams of various colors swept across the structure's surface. Day-Wan could hear the fleet-wide communications channel, alien voices speaking in rapid bursts of untranslated language. Then Fleet Commander Zilthar's voice cut through the chatter. "All ships report your findings." One by one, the alien vessels responded. The Luxari scanners found nothing. The Skarn quantum analysis returned corrupted data. The Keth sensors simply stopped working when pointed at the structure. Every advanced technology the fleet possessed was useless. "Human vessel," Zilthar's voice carried an edge of frustration. "What do your primitive scanners detect?" Day-Wan gestured to Hana, who began their own scan. The steadfast sensors were simple compared to alien technology. They used electromagnetic radiation, basic physics, and straightforward mathematics. Nothing fancy. Nothing that should work better than quantum-level analysis. "We're detecting a metal alloy," Hana reported. "Mostly iron and carbon with traces of chromium and nickel. Standard hull plating. There are energy signatures inside, but they're faint. Whatever power source this thing has, it's running on minimal output." "Metal alloy?" Zilthar sounded incredulous. "You're saying this structure is made of simple metal?" "That's what our scans show." There was silence on the channel. Then Zilthar spoke again. "We will send an exploration team. Prepare your personnel." The team assembled on the Luxari flagship. Day-Wan brought Bora with him, figuring a scientist would be more useful than a military officer. The Luxari provided environment suits that adapted to any atmosphere. The Skarn brought cutting tools that could slice through any known material. Everyone was prepared for anything, except what they actually found. The structure's surface was smooth up close, marked only by those geometric patterns. They covered every visible surface, flowing and shifting like water frozen in time. Dr. Vincera, the Luxari archaeologist, ran a handheld scanner over them. "Fascinating," he said through the suit's translator. "The patterns appear to be mathematical in nature, but they don't correspond to any known language or notation system in the galactic database." Bora knelt down, examining the patterns more closely. She pulled out her own scanner, a simple tablet computer that looked crude compared to Vincera's crystalline device. She began taking images, running them through Earth's historical archives. The others searched for an entrance. Zilthar, a massive reptilian creature in a suit that made him look even larger, pointed to an area where the patterns converged. "Here," he said. "This looks like it might be a door." Vincera approached and began analyzing the area. His scanner projected holographic symbols into the air, alien mathematics that meant nothing to Day-Wan. Minutes passed, then hours. Nothing worked. "Perhaps we should try cutting through," suggested one of the Keth technicians. "No," Vincera said firmly. "This structure is clearly ancient and possibly fragile. We must find the proper way to—" "I think I've got something," Bora said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was still kneeling by the wall, her tablet held up to the patterns. Her hands were shaking. "These symbols," she said slowly, "they're not alien. They're human." The statement hung in the air like a physical thing. Zilthar moved closer, his massive frame looming over Bora. "Explain," he demanded. Bora's fingers moved across her tablet screen. "The patterns use a mathematical notation system developed on Earth in the early 22nd century. It was based on binary code and geometric progression. We stopped using it around 2180 because it was too complex for everyday use. But it was perfect for deep space engineering. And these symbols here," she pointed at a specific sequence, "they're instructions. A lock combination." "Impossible," Vincera said. "Humanity only achieved interstellar travel 15 years ago. You have no deep space engineering history." "That's what we thought," Bora said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "But these symbols don't lie." She began touching the patterns in a specific sequence following the mathematical instructions. For a moment nothing happened. Then the wall began to move. A deep rumbling sound vibrated through their suits as massive doors, each one hundreds of meters tall, slowly ground open. Light spilled out from inside. Emergency lighting, dim and red, but still functioning after who knew how long. The team stood frozen, staring into the corridor beyond. And there, on the wall just inside the entrance, was text. English text, Korean text, Chinese text, human languages, written in clean block letters. Outpost Garam, authorized personnel only. Daewon felt his legs go weak. He reached out to steady himself against the door frame, and his gloved hand touched a handrail. A handrail positioned at exactly the right height for a human hand. The doorway itself was sized for humans. The corridor beyond was built to human scale. "This is a human structure," he said aloud, and hearing the words made them real in a way that seeing hadn't quite accomplished. Zilthar pushed past him, moving into the corridor. The others followed. The emergency lights cast everything in a red glow, making shadows dance on the walls. More text appeared as they walked, warning labels and directional signs in multiple human languages. They found the control room 50 meters in. It was large, filled with consoles and displays, all dark. Bora approached the main panel and brushed away a layer of dust. Underneath, more text appeared. Main control, Outpost Garam, established 2147. 2147, Vinzera read aloud. That's 700 years ago. Before humanity was supposed to have interstellar travel, added a Keth technician. Before first contact. Before any of this should have been possible. Bora found a manual power switch, a simple mechanical lever. She pulled it and the control room came to life. Displays flickered on. Holographic projections filled the air. A computer voice spoke in English, startling everyone. "Warning, station has been on emergency power for 682 years. Main systems offline. Life support at minimal function. Please initiate full restart sequence." Daewon moved to the main console. The interface was old but recognizable. The same basic design that human ships still used. He began entering commands, navigating through menus that seemed both ancient and familiar. "Status report," he said to the computer. "Outpost Garam is a Class A research station." The computer replied. "Construction completed 2147. Crew capacity 500. Current crew count 0. Last logged activity 2179. "What happened in 2179? Bora asked. "Emergency evacuation protocol activated. All personnel ordered to return to Earth. Station placed on automatic standby. No further contact received." The room fell silent. Daewon pulled up more information and a star map appeared in the holographic display. It showed this sector of space dotted with markers. Dozens of markers. Each one was labeled with a name and a date. Outpost Garam. Research Station Minjin. Colony Ship Heejin 5. Manufacturing Platform Soman. The list went on and on, all of them dated between 2120 and 2180. "What are these?" Zilthar demanded. Daewon's mouth was dry. "They're other human installations. According to this map, there are hundreds of them spread across this entire sector." "Hundreds?" Vincera moved closer to the display. "But that would mean humanity had an empire out here, 700 years ago." "Not an empire," Bora said softly. She was reading through the station's logs on another console. "An exploration network. They were mapping space, conducting research, preparing for colonization. They called it the Deep Space Initiative." She pulled up more files. Images appeared in the holographic display. Humans in old-style spacesuits standing on alien worlds. Construction crews building massive structures in the void. Scientists examining strange phenomena. All of it happening 700 years in the past. "This changes everything," Zilthar said, and he was right. Because if humans had built all of this 700 years ago, if they had spread across the stars and established hundreds, over the next several days power was gradually restored to more sections of Outpost Garam. Each new area revealed more of the station's secrets, and with each revelation, the alien delegates grew quieter. Hana had joined the exploration team on the second day, unable to resist seeing the engineering herself. Now she stood in the main reactor chamber, staring up at a fusion core that was nearly identical to the one aboard the Steadfast. Just bigger. Much bigger. "This is impossible," she said for the 10th time that hour. Technician Taemin, a young engineer who had come with the second wave of human personnel, looked up from his diagnostic scanner. "What's impossible about it?" "This reactor design. It's the Model 7 configuration. We use it on our current ships, but this one was built 700 years ago. So our ancestors invented it back then?" "That's what I thought at first," Hana said. "But look at the maintenance logs." She pulled up a holographic display showing decades of repair records. They were constantly improving it, refining it. Each modification made it more efficient. And if you trace the development forward, she ran a simulation. This is what they would have ended up with if they'd kept working on it. The simulation showed a reactor that looked exactly like the ones in modern human ships. We didn't invent the Model 7, Hana said quietly. We rediscovered it. Our ancestors spent 60 years perfecting this design, and then something happened, and we lost all that knowledge. When we built new ships 15 years ago, we figured it out again. We thought we were being innovative, but we were just following the same path they did 700 years earlier. Taemin was silent for a moment. Then he pointed to a panel on the reactor housing. What's that? Hana moved closer. The panel had been sealed with warning markers, the kind that meant do not open unless you know what you're doing. She carefully removed the bolts and pulled the panel away. Inside was another system, nested within the main reactor like a secret. It was smaller, more complex, using principles that Hana recognized but had never seen implemented in practice. Is that a quantum field generator? Hana finished. Early stage, probably a prototype, but yes. They were working on advanced drive systems too. She took images and sent them back to the Steadfast. Within an hour, she had a response from Earth's top scientists. The design was similar to the quantum phase drives that the Luxari Collective used. But this one was simpler, more elegant, and according to the analysis, more efficient. Humans had been working on this technology 700 years ago. The Luxari had invented their version only 300 years ago. Elsewhere in the station, Bora was making her own discoveries. The archives contained personnel records, mission logs, and thousands of hours of video footage. She watched a recording from 2156, showing the station's construction. Crews of humans working in space, assembling the massive structure piece by piece. What struck her was how methodical it all was. No dramatic moments. No miraculous technology. Just humans doing math, solving problems, and building something enormous through careful planning and hard work. They didn't have artificial gravity generators, she noted aloud. Dr. Vincera was with her, watching the same footage. They used rotating sections to simulate gravity. Primitive, Vincera said automatically. Then he stopped himself. No, not primitive, practical. It requires no exotic materials, no complex field generators, just basic physics. And it still works, Bora added. She gestured around them. The station's rotating sections continued to provide gravity after 7 centuries. How many of the fleet's ships can say that? How many would still function after being abandoned for 700 years? Vincera didn't answer. They both knew the truth. The Luxari flagship, with all its advanced technology, required constant maintenance. The quantum drives needed exotic particles that existed naturally only near black holes. The neural networks needed regular updates. The ships were powerful, but they were also fragile. Human technology, with its mechanical systems and simple physics, just kept working. Bora pulled up more files. Construction records showed how the station had been built. The materials were all things that could be found in any asteroid field: iron, nickel, carbon, silicon. The humans had mined asteroids, processed the raw materials, and manufactured everything they needed right here in space. No supply lines back to Earth, she said. They were completely self-sufficient. How? Vincera asked. The Luxari Collective required support from our homeworld for the first 1,000 years of our space expansion. We needed rare elements that could only be found on our planet. Humans didn't use rare elements, Bora explained. They designed everything to use common materials. Look at this. She showed him a schematic for the station's computer systems. These processors are made from silicon and copper. Basic semiconductors, not quantum matrices or neural crystals, just simple electronics that could be manufactured anywhere. She pulled up another file, and when something broke, they could fix it with tools and spare parts made right here on the station. They didn't need a factory back on Earth producing specialized components. Fleet Commander Zilthar entered the archive room. His reptilian face was difficult to read, but his body language spoke of frustration. He'd spent the last 2 days examining the station's defensive systems. I have completed my analysis, he announced. This station has weapons. Weapons? Daewon, who had just arrived with the latest supply shuttle, looked concerned. What kind? Kinetic accelerators. They fire physical projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Zilthar pulled up a diagram. Primitive by modern standards. Our directed energy weapons are far more sophisticated. But Daewon sensed there was more. But the kinetic accelerators have no complex components that can fail. No focusing crystals that can crack. No energy cells that can deplete, just magnetic coils and physical ammunition. And according to the test logs, they have a range of nearly 1 million kilometers with perfect accuracy. He highlighted part of the diagram. The Skarn hegemony's weapons have a maximum effective range of 800,000 kilometers, and we developed our systems only 200 years ago. The implications settled over the room like a heavy blanket. The aliens had mocked human technology for being simple, for using physical components and mechanical systems. But that simplicity was a strength, not a weakness. Over the next few days, more teams arrived from both the fleet and from Earth. Each new discovery reinforced the same message. The station's life support systems were more efficient than modern galactic standards. The radiation shielding used layered materials that cost almost nothing to produce, but provided better protection than exotic force fields. The hull design could withstand micrometeorite impacts that would puncture the hulls of more advanced ships. Ambassador Jiwoo arrived on day 5, bringing with her a historian named Dr. Young-soo. He was an old man who specialized in what Earth called the Silent Years, the period from roughly 2177 to 188, when historical records became fragmented and unclear. I've spent my entire career trying to understand what happened during those years, Young-soo said as Daewon gave him a tour of the station. We have peaces, wars, natural disasters, social collapse, but the full picture was always missing. And now? Daewon asked. Now I understand why. We didn't just lose some records. We lost everything. These outposts, these colonies, this entire expansion into space, it was all forgotten. When Earth finally recovered and rebuilt, nobody remembered that we'd done this before. They stood in the station's memorial hall. The walls were covered with names, thousands of them, representing everyone who had worked on the Deep Space Initiative. Young-soo ran his hand along the engraved metal. They thought they were building humanity's future, he said softly. They thought people would remember them. Instead, they became a footnote that nobody could read. That evening, Fleet Commander Zilthar called an emergency meeting. All the delegates gathered in the station's main conference room, a space designed for human-sized beings that made many of the aliens uncomfortable. We must discuss what has been discovered here, Zilthar said. The implications for the Galactic Council are significant. High Arbiter Velquin appeared via hologram, broadcasting from the Luxari flagship. I have reviewed all the reports. I have verified the data personally. There is no doubt about the authenticity of this station or its age. Then we must acknowledge the truth, said a Keth representative. Humanity achieved interstellar capability 700 years before they claimed to. Their technology, which we mocked as primitive, is actually refined and optimized from 7 centuries of development. More than that, Vincera added. Their engineering philosophy, using simple, robust systems instead of complex, fragile ones, is valid, perhaps even superior in some applications. Velquin was quiet for a long moment. When they spoke again, their voice had lost its usual condescension. I owe humanity an apology. We judged them based on surface appearances. We assumed that simpler meant inferior. We were wrong. Other aliens murmured agreement. Zilthar turned to Ambassador Jiwoo. Ambassador, the Galactic Council will need to reassess humanity's status. Your species has a longer history of space travel than most of our members. Your technology is proven over centuries. We should have recognized this from the beginning. The discovery of Outpost Garam changed everything. Within 2 weeks, the Galactic Council had authorized a massive search operation. Teams were dispatched to every location marked on the station's ancient star maps. What they found exceeded everyone's expectations. Research Station Minjun, orbiting a gas giant, still had its laboratories intact. The experiments documented there showed humans working on terraforming technology, trying to figure out how to make hostile worlds livable. The techniques they developed were more efficient than methods the Council use today. Manufacturing platform Soman turned out to be a massive factory in space, capable of processing asteroids and producing everything from hull plating to computer chips. It had been designed to operate with a crew of just 50 people. Modern facilities required thousands. Colony ship Heejin 5 was found drifting near a star system that would have been perfect for settlement. Its engines were silent, but its hull was intact. Inside, living quarters for 10,000 people waited empty, preserved by the vacuum of space. Each discovery told the same story. Humans had been out here 700 years ago, building an empire of exploration and research. And then something had happened. Something that made them all leave. Captain Daewon stood in his quarters aboard the Steadfast, reviewing reports from a dozen different sites. The ship was currently docked at a newly discovered installation called Research Platform Bora, named, ironically, after his science officer. The real Bora was down on the platform now leading the investigation team. A message came through on his communication panel. It was Dr. Youngsu calling from Earth. "Captain, I have information you need to see." Daewon brought up the video link. Youngsu looked tired, but his eyes were bright with excitement. Behind him, Daewon could see archives, old books, and data crystals spread across tables. "I've been going through Earth's historical records again," Youngsu said, "looking for anything related to the Deep Space Initiative. Most of it was lost or destroyed during the silent years, but I found fragments, enough to piece together a timeline." He pulled up a document and shared it to Daewon's screen. The initiative began in 2118 with the launch of the first colony ship. Within 60 years, humanity had established over 400 installations across 300 light-years of space. It was the greatest achievement in human history. And then, Daewon asked, and then came 2177. That's when the records start to break down. We know there were wars on Earth, resource conflicts, climate disasters, political instability, but I think it was more than that. I think contact was lost with the deep space installations. Without support from Earth, without new supplies and personnel, the outposts couldn't sustain themselves. Youngsu's expression grew somber. The evacuation order went out in 2179. All personnel were instructed to return to Earth. Most of them did. But Earth itself was in chaos. The returning colonists found a world that had changed, a world that was too busy surviving to remember what it had built in space. So the knowledge was just forgotten? Not forgotten, lost. There's a difference. During the silent years, massive amounts of data were destroyed. Libraries burned. Computer networks crashed. By the time humanity recovered around 2200, an entire generation had passed. The people who remembered the Deep Space Initiative were gone. Their children knew only fragments, stories that sounded like myths. Daewon felt a chill. So when we rediscovered space travel 15 years ago, you thought you were starting fresh? You thought you were pioneers. But you were actually following in the footsteps of your ancestors, rebuilding what they had already built 700 years before. The implications were staggering. Modern humanity hadn't invented their technology through innovation. They had reinvented it through necessity. The designs seemed simple because they were refined, optimized through centuries of parallel development, separated by time, but following the same logical path. A new message interrupted them. It was from Hana, down in the engineering section of Research Platform Bora. "Captain, you need to see this, now." Daewon ended his call with Youngsu and headed for the shuttle bay. 20 minutes later, he was walking through the corridors of the research platform, following Hana's directions to the main reactor room. What he found there made him stop in his tracks. The reactor core had been opened, and inside was a drive system unlike anything he had seen before. It wasn't the fusion drives that human ships used. It wasn't even like the quantum drives the Luxari had. It was something else entirely. "We found it hidden in the maintenance records," Hana explained. She was practically vibrating with excitement. They were testing it. A new type of propulsion that could move a ship without using traditional thrust. It creates a bubble around the vessel and moves space itself. "That's impossible," Daewon said. But even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't. The evidence was right in front of him. The Luxari Collective developed quantum phase drives 400 years ago, Hana continued. But this design is 700 years old. And look at the efficiency ratings. She pulled up a holographic comparison. The ancient human prototype is more efficient than modern Luxari technology. Fleet Commander Zilthar had arrived as well, along with Dr. Vinzera. The Luxari scientist was examining the drive system with something that looked like shock on their crystalline features. "This changes our understanding of technological development," Vinzera said slowly. "We thought humanity was behind us. We thought they were primitive. But they were already working on technologies that wouldn't be perfected by other species for hundreds of years. Why didn't they use it?" Zilthar asked. "Why stick with fusion drives if they had this?" Hana pulled up more files. "Because it wasn't ready. The logs show dozens of test flights. Most were successful, but some had problems. The technology was promising but unstable. They were still refining it when the evacuation order came. So they left it behind, Day One said. They built these amazing things and then they just walked away. Science Officer Bora entered the reactor room, breathing hard from running. Captain, we found something else. In the station's library section. You need to see this. They followed her to a room filled with data storage units, old-style magnetic drives that had somehow survived 7 centuries in space. Bora had connected them to a modern terminal and was pulling up files. The research platform wasn't just testing propulsion systems, she said. They were studying everything. Physics, biology, mathematics. They were trying to understand the fundamental nature of reality. She pulled up a document. It was a scientific paper, written in 2178, just a year before the evacuation. The title read, Practical Applications of Quantum Field Manipulation. This paper describes techniques that the Galactic Council didn't develop until 300 years later. Bora said, energy shields, matter fabrication, faster-than-light communication, all of it. The humans of 2178 were theorizing about technologies that most council species can barely use today. Vincera examined the paper carefully. The mathematics is sound. The theories are correct, they knew. 700 years ago, humans knew how to do all of this. But they never got the chance to implement it, Day One said quietly. The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Humanity had been on the verge of something incredible. They had been about to leap forward, to become a true spacefaring civilization with technology that would rival or exceed anything the galaxy had seen. And then it all collapsed. The silent years had stolen not just history but potential, an entire future that might have been. Ambassador Jiwoo arrived that evening, bringing with her representatives from several council species. They gathered in the research platform's main conference room, which was too small for some of the larger aliens but served its purpose. We have reviewed the findings from all sites, Jiwoo began. The picture is clear. Ancient humanity was not primitive. They were innovators. They built hundreds of installations across the galaxy. They developed technologies that were centuries ahead of their time. And then they lost everything, finished Zilthar. Just as they were about to achieve greatness, they fell. Which raises a question, said High Arbiter Velquin via hologram. Modern humanity rebuilt. They reached the stars again. They redeveloped their technology. How is this possible? How does a civilization collapse so completely and then rise again in just 700 years? Everyone looked at Jiwoo. She stood quietly for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Resilience, she finally said. Humanity has always been resilient. We fall, we struggle, we suffer, but we get back up. We rebuild. We try again. 700 years ago, we lost everything. But we didn't lose the one thing that matters most, the desire to reach beyond ourselves, to explore, to discover, to build. No other council species has ever recovered from a collapse of this magnitude, Vincera noted. The Luxari had a dark age 3,000 years ago. It lasted for 1/500 years before we recovered. The Skarn experienced something similar. It took us 2,000 years to rebuild. Humans did it in 700, Zilthar said, and they did it without knowing they were rebuilding. They thought they were starting fresh. That might be even more impressive. But Day One was looking at something else, a file that Bora had flagged but not opened yet. It was marked Project Hadal Final Mission Report 2179. 3 months after the discovery of Outpost Garam, Captain Day One stood on the bridge of the Steadfast once more. But this time his ship was not alone. A fleet of 20 vessels surrounded him, representing a dozen species from the Galactic Council. They were all heading in the same direction, following a 700-year-old flight plan toward the galactic core. They were looking for Project Hadal. Approaching the first coordinate, Hana reported from her station. This is where the mission log suggests they would have stopped for resupply. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near a small moon orbiting a gas giant. Scans began immediately. It took less than an hour to find what they were looking for. A small outpost built into the moon's surface, its signature barely visible against the cosmic background radiation. Another human installation, Bora confirmed, smaller than the others we've found. Probably a way station. They sent down a team. The outpost was empty but intact, its system still running on emergency power. The log showed that Project Hadal had indeed stopped here, restocking supplies and making repairs. The date was 2181, 2 years after they had left human space, but there was more. Personal journals left behind by the crew, video recordings, messages for loved ones back on Earth that were never sent. Science Officer Bora watched one of the recordings. A woman in her 30s wearing the uniform of the Deep Space Initiative looked into the camera with tired but determined eyes. "We're 6 months into the mission," she said. "The ships are holding up well. Better than we expected, honestly. We passed through what we think is inhabited space 3 weeks ago. Detected artificial structures orbiting a star system, but we didn't stop. Our mission is to reach the core and map the galactic arm. Contact with other civilizations will have to wait." The recording ended. Bora felt a chill. Those artificial structures the woman mentioned might have been Luxari stations. Project Hadal had passed right through alien territory without making contact. They had been focused on their mission, on reaching their goal. The fleet continued following the trail. More way stations were found, each one marking another stop on Project Hadal's journey. The logs showed a crew that was optimistic, professional, and completely unaware of what was happening back on Earth. They didn't know about the wars. They didn't know about the collapse. They were too far away to receive communications. They kept going, Ambassador Jiwoo said quietly. She had joined the expedition personally, bringing with her a full diplomatic delegation. Even when Earth stopped responding, they kept going. Fleet Commander Zilthar stood beside her, his massive frame dwarfing the human ambassador. They were committed to their mission. That is admirable. 2 weeks into the search, they found something that changed the investigation. It was a debris field, scattered across several cubic kilometers of space. The wreckage was old, corroded by centuries of exposure to cosmic radiation and micrometeorites. "Analyzing the debris now," Hana said. She sounded tense. "Getting readings consistent with human hull materials. Configuration suggests it was part of a larger vessel." Daewon felt his stomach tighten. Had they found the end of Project Hadal? Had the mission ended in disaster? But as the analysis continued, the story became more complex. The debris was from only one ship, not 6. And it wasn't from a catastrophic explosion. The damage pattern suggested the vessel had been carefully dismantled, its components salvaged and removed. They cannibalized it, Hana concluded. One of the ships had problems, and they took it apart to repair the others. They searched the debris field and found a log buoy, a small automated beacon designed to record and transmit information. It had been floating here for 700 years, its power cells long dead. Hana managed to extract its data storage. The logs showed that Ship 4 of Project Hadal had suffered a reactor failure in 2189. The crew had evacuated to the other vessels, and the damaged ship was systematically stripped for parts. The remaining 5 ships had continued the mission. "Where did they go from here?" Zilthar asked. Bora pulled up the updated trajectory. "Further in, toward the core. If they maintained course, they would be—" She stopped, her eyes widening. "What is it?" Daewon asked. "They would be in the Tempest Reach, the region where we found Outpost Garum." The realization hit everyone at once. Project Hadal hadn't been heading away from human space. They had been traveling in a wide loop, mapping the galactic arm and eventually turning back toward home. The Tempest Reach was on their return trajectory. They were coming home, Jiwoo said. After all those years, they were coming home. The fleet changed course, heading toward the Tempest Reach at maximum speed. It took 4 days to reach the region. The search area was massive, and they split up to cover more ground. It was the Luxari flagship that found it. High Arbiter Velquin's excited transmission came through on all channels. "We have located a large vessel. Human design. Intact. Coordinates being transmitted now." The fleet converged on the location. What they found took Daewon's breath away. The ship was enormous, 10 times the size of the Steadfast. It was a generation vessel, designed to carry thousands of people across the vast distances between stars. Its hull was scarred and pitted from centuries of wear, but it was whole. And on its side, still visible after 700 years, was a name. Pioneer Garum 7. "Garum," Hana whispered, "like Outpost Garum." "They named the ship after the outpost," Bora said. Or maybe the outpost was named after the ship. Either way, they're connected. Teams boarded the derelict vessel carefully. The interior was cold and dark, but the structure was sound. They made their way to the bridge, a massive command center designed to coordinate the activities of thousands of crew members. Captain Day Wan stood in the center of the bridge and felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The captain's chair was still there, empty and waiting. Control panels lined the walls, their screens dark. "Can we access the logs?" he asked. Hana found the main computer and began working. It took time, but eventually, she managed to power up the system enough to retrieve the final entries. A holographic recording appeared. A man in his 60s wearing the uniform of a ship's captain looked out at them across 7 centuries. "This is Captain Junho of the Pioneer Garam 7, final entry. We've completed our mission. We've mapped 300 star systems, documented dozens of potentially habitable worlds, and gathered data that will help humanity expand across the galaxy." The captain paused, and his expression grew sad. "But we've received no communications from Earth in 8 years. We don't know what's happened. Whether humanity still exists out there or whether we're alone." Another pause. "We've made the decision to evacuate to the 3rd planet of System J247. It's a world we surveyed 3 years ago. Breathable atmosphere, liquid water, compatible biochemistry. We can survive there. We'll leave the Pioneer here as a marker, a monument to what we accomplished." The captain looked directly into the camera, as if he could see across time to whoever would eventually watch this recording. "If anyone finds this, know that we tried. We went as far as we could go. We saw wonders that words can't describe. We did what humans do best. We explored. We discovered. We built something that mattered. And if Earth survived, if humanity endured, then know this: we'll be waiting. On that planet down there, we and our descendants will be waiting for you to find us. However long it takes. We're still human. We're still your family." The recording ended. The bridge fell silent. Bora checked the star charts. "System J247. It's only 2 light years from here." We're going," Jiwoo said firmly. "We're going to find them." But when they reached the planet, what they found was ruins. Ancient structures, crumbled and overgrown. Archaeological evidence suggested a settlement that had lasted for perhaps a century before failing. The descendants of Project Hadal had tried to survive, but without support from Earth, without technology to replace what wore out, they had eventually faded away. They were gone. All of them. The brave explorers who had traveled so far and seen so much had died on a distant world, believing they were the last of their kind. The expedition held a memorial service on the planet's surface. Representatives from every council species attended. They placed a monument, a simple stone marker with the names of Project Hadal's crew and a message. "They were the best of us. We will remember." But the expedition had one more discovery waiting. In the ruins of the settlement, buried beneath centuries of soil and vegetation, they found a vault. Inside were data archives, carefully preserved in sealed containers. The complete records of Project Hadal's journey. Every star they visited, every world they mapped, every discovery they made. And more than that, they found the complete technical database from the Deep Space Initiative. Everything that had been lost during the silent years. The accumulated knowledge of humanity's first age of space exploration, preserved by people who knew it was important, even as their own civilization crumbled. Ambassador Jiwoo held one of the data containers and felt tears running down her face. They saved it. Even knowing they wouldn't survive, they saved it for us. The fleet returned to Council space 3 weeks later. The Galactic Council convened for an emergency session at Vertex Prime Station. The chamber was packed with representatives from every member species.